Christmas past, unpleasant, and no future. Welcome to Mark and Pete. Here's a thought.
Reflecting on the Christmas past, where golden memories once were cast, remembering all gifts, small and vast, the festive fun has faded fast. The chilling call of Christmas present transpires to be extremely unpleasant, chasing food like a half-plucked pheasant, and living life as an impoverished peasant. Contemplating Christmases that are to come, the picture appears particularly glum. The finger of fate shows limbs are numb, which will be the painful rule of thumb. Happy Christmas.
Yeah.
Clergyman Pete, I say to you, well, let's reflect on Christmases past, present, and those to come. Let me ask you, Clergyman Pete, what does Christmas mean to you? And more importantly, let's start with what are your favourite memories of Christmas past?
Well, Christmas is one of my favourite festivals in the church, in the Christian calendar. Easter is also great, but Christmas I remember particularly from quite young, going down to midnight communion, midnight mass. So going to church just before midnight, the candles lighting the church, and singing the Christmas carols. And then taking communion, the bread and the wine, remembering, you see, that Jesus came as a baby, but it was in his death for us as an adult that all lives were changed. So it was very meaningful part of the Christian year for me. And then, of course, in the morning, you wake up and open all your presents.
Well, that's right, or somebody else's.
Well, I'm not choosing, but yeah, that was sort of the pattern that I had. So I didn't go to church on Christmas morning. I know, sacrilege, Well, I did in effect. I was there until about 1 o'clock, but I then came home and then got up late on Christmas Day. It was always my pattern. What about you? What is your memory
my
of
earliest
Christmas
memory
past?
of Christmases sort of still stands out to me quite distinctively is that my parents used to have this rather tacky Christmas tree. It was a silver one, which is unusual. But what it always used to remind me of is that was the giver of gifts. Yes, the tree. Of course, it's not until you grow up a little bit older, like when I was 25, 28, I realized that
Last year, you mean? That's what you mean?
Last year. Yeah. I realised that it wasn't Father Christmas that actually gave the gifts. But yes, I remember those sort of murky memories where, people had, the ripping over wrapping paper, thinking, this is great fun, making a mess and having gifts. Why can't it be every day?
Yes. I also remember eating lots of chocolate at that time. But the other thing to note is that the place was still outside. There was no traffic. Everything was closed, and that's not the same to the same degree these days. And if you, as we always used to do, go out for a walk after lunch on Christmas Day, having had a huge meal, sort of wobbling around the lake in the park near where we lived, there'd be a few other people going around, and some kids with their new bikes and that sort of thing, but generally, again, it was very, very quiet. There's just no one around. That sort of memory of Christmas past, also a memory of Sundays past, I suppose, when things used to close. You had a proper pattern to life where people could rest, be rejuvenated. You have a proper Christmas holiday.
Yes. Now, I will say, Clergyman Pete, that Christmas past, to me, to your point, seemed to evolve a lot more, particularly when I was at school, around the church. And, many church activities and, of course, nativities and school plays sort of pivoted around that. And so, too, did the local vicar come along, give some sermons, and you sang lots of Christmas carols. Well, it seems, and I don't know whether this is true of our listeners, that Christmas past seemed jolly fun. Well, now we come to the chilling call of Christmas present. Clergyman Pete, I ask you, what are your plans, and what do you think about Christmas today?
Well, Businessman Mark, we have interesting divergence in Christmas. People still love Christmas. I can see that, but
they can't afford it.
They can't afford it. So in my church, the church building, St Paul's Church in Seacombe. I just returned before recording this podcast. I returned from there where we'd opened up so that people could have somewhere warm. And in fact, it was quite opposite really, because just as we did that, one of the streets around here, all the electricity was cut off. They had a blackout, and the first of many to come. So what's happening? Christmas present. I don't think it's that jolly a time because of various. We've talked about it on this podcast before. Mismanagement by the government, more so than things like actual diseases and wars. It's more government policy that has made things very bad in terms of energy supply, etc. But the etc. I mean people's financial well-being, such that the church that I'm working in, we're having to have food for people, sort of like a food bank, not actually a food bank, but a place where they can get food either cheap or free in the church building.
Yeah.
So it's a very different Christmas. But in terms of it becoming more secular, which it did over the years, people not really realizing quite what Christmas is about. Is it about Santa Claus or is it about the baby Jesus? Well, I see a return. I could see a big return to religiosity, to Christianity over the past few months, because people need. This is my theorizing as to why it is. People need something to hang on to.
They do.
Certain. And so we're seeing a lot of interest in the three churches where I act as vicar, in people searching for that meaning. Not necessarily, in fact, not in general, coming to the formal worship services, but in being in part of the community of the church, which still includes prayer and this class of thing. So Christmas this year, I see it as very hopeful, in that I see a sea change in people's attitude to the church and to belief in God. I think the baby Jesus is making a comeback.
Well, let's hope so, because when we think about the Christmas present, yes, folks, I was actually given a pre-Christmas present, which was my little Scrooge gloves. Yes, the fingerless gloves.
I noticed you wearing fingerless.
Yes, exactly, and that is genuine, folks. Yes, there's some very necessary in these rather cold, austere times, and as we all know,
and you being in character very much like Scrooge.
Absolutely.
Yes, that's very
with no heating on. But the thing here is that when we think about people who are struggling to eat and heat their home in their homes, this is a difficult time, and it's also a very difficult time for businesses. We've seen strikes all over the place, and this is not a great thing. I'm hoping that people can have a little bit more kindness in their hearts and realize that yes, they have quite rightly reasons to perhaps take action. But there are those sad people who will be victims this Christmas, and that's the thing that I worry. From a business perspective, of course, Christmas is meant to be one of the biggest boom periods, and I suspect that perhaps that sort of bridge links to the next point, which is contemplating Christmases that are to come. Clergyman Pete, I ask you for your thoughts and predictions of things that will happen in the future, and what does that future really look like for us?
Well, business and market, the next Christmas after this, another year's time, we could be in a very different world. We see the problems with conflict centered around Ukraine, but various different major powers involved. We see the overreaction and misappropriation of funds, etc., to do with COVID-19 having its long reach. It's as though the whole world has caught long COVID. It's still having an effect today, the mismanagement of that. And we could see by next Christmas a much poorer country in Britain, and we could see therefore a very different Christmas. But as I was saying earlier, I think that draws people back to God. In the first Christmas, when Jesus was born and all that, it was there were various people who visited the home of Jesus where he was born, which is of course not in his hometown, but in Bethlehem, where his parents had gone for a census. And some wise men from the east came They'd seen a star, they followed it, and when on the way they met the evil King Herod.
Yes.
And he was out to get them, and so they heard from God in a dream. This is Matthew 2 verse 12, that they should not return to Herod once they'd been to see him, and they went, having seen Jesus, they departed to their own country another way. So they went, they found Jesus, and they avoided evil. And I'm praying, and my hope is, and I think this will happen, that next Christmas we will see us being materially worse off, but spiritually better off, because somehow I see it already, that lack of certainty about your material well-being points you more towards Jesus, and your spiritual well-being can improve as a result. So that's Christmas future I see being a better Christmas.
Well, I mean, let's hope so. I mean, from my perspective, from a business perspective, I definitely think there are going to be some challenges. We already see that, interest rates are going up and businesses are struggling. Supply chain is an issue. Energy with the crisis is not just affecting people at home, but affecting supply chains, manufacturers, and many others. But having said that, I do think that there is some sense of optimism. Britain, who, of course, obviously made the decision to try and wrench itself away from Europe, actually has an opportunity to try and sort of pave the way of independence. Still picking those bits of red tape, I know, still painfully from the EU Christmas tree. But I think that we will actually see a little bit more optimism towards the end of next year. What I do have an issue with is, and I think that this is where I think policies definitely need to change, is the migration issue. I think that's definitely been a painful process for everyone. We've seen some sad incidents during 2022. I think we are going to see more of that in 2023. But, maybe that perhaps if, dare I say, and I know that we say this with tongue in cheek, that the British government could get its act together, it might actually have some policies that could solve the problem. But here's the other thing as well. I do think that when we sort of think about the spiritual side, we've seen, and we had a podcast recently, that Christianity seems to be on the wane. But I do agree that maybe people are looking for something that gives them guidance. Pete,
yes.
I say to you that maybe here is the little glimmer and star in the horizon, shining brightly. Why not give a nice little message to our lovely listeners for this festive season and for Christmases to come?
Well, the thing is, going back to what you're saying about people not identifying as Christian, as shown in the results of the census, I think the church has let people down, and one of the ways it's let people down, and I'm a leader of a local church. We've let them down by not getting across the simple message about what Christianity is all about. And it's really, if you look at the message of what happened that first Christmas, it's very simple. It's this: God, who made everything, who made human beings originally, is still active and loves us. He's like our Heavenly Father. He is our Heavenly Father. And God, became a human being. And it's pictured like this. God Father sends his Son. I mean, it's all just one God. God becomes a human being. God sends his Son to be brought up by a human family, becomes one of us. So he understands us. Yes, he's all powerful. He's all knowing. He knows knows what you need, and he hears your prayers. But more than that, he understands. He's with you in the difficulty. He's with you in the good times and the bad. And he knows this because he's experienced it himself. And so this Christmas time, when you picture the baby Jesus in a manger, maybe it's on a Christmas card or a nativity scene, remember that in that the average baby is about 20 inches long. In that 20 inches of human being is all the goodness and the greatness of God, packaged really small and accessible and humble. So come to God, because he is knowable. You can know him, and he can know you through Jesus Christ. That is the meaning of Christmas, and that gives hope for the future, for Christmas and for 2023 and beyond.
God bless us one and all.
God bless us, everyone.